For more on the protests over racial injustice, I'm joined now by Douglas Sloan, principal with the National Capital Strategy Group and vice president of the NAACP here in Washington, D.C. Douglas, despite what we saw with George Floyd back in May and all the protests that followed, not just here in the United States, but around the world, we have seen Jacob Blake and others killed since then. What has been happening inside police departments since then? There hasn't been many changes. So why is that?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. It seems as though common sense would dictate that police officers in this country and police departments nationwide would be much more wary of how they are policing communities of color in particular to try to avoid situations like the one that just happened with Jacob Blake. It's beyond me how we're still seeing some of these blatant disparities in treatment by police of Black males right after the killing of George Floyd and the subsequent protests that we saw nationwide and worldwide. So, I think that really speaks to some of the systemic racism in these police departments and how, I guess at this point, they're really unable to help themselves in terms of how they are policing communities of color and how they are treating Black men when they engage with them in these communities.
Yeah, it sounds like there's been a lot of talk at the local level between mayor's offices and police departments, but nothing really has been done on a larger level. Douglas, I want to ask you about today's march on Washington. We heard from family members of Black men killed by police. What are some of your observations from today, some takeaways from this major event?
Well, with everyone is kind of singing the same song regarding the march, that we need to see change, that we're tired of the status quo, that this has been going on for too long, and we have to see a change in how police are interacting with Black males in particular and Black people on a larger scale nationwide. And quite frankly, that change is going to have to come through laws that are passed nationwide. We would like to see some laws that would ensure that all police officers have to wear body cameras at all times. We'd perhaps like to see that if there is a shooting and police officers are found to be in the wrong, that the settlement money comes out of police pensions. That could go a long way to ensuring that some of these cops are not going to be so careless when dealing with Black people. And we just have to look at, perhaps go back to some of the changes that Barack Obama had sought to institute within the criminal justice system, where we were slowly starting to see changes implemented with how police were dealing with communities of color. But we're going to have to get back to that, and we're really going to have to see changes on a nationwide level, and that's going to start with Congress and the White House.
That being said, it has been 57 years since Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. We heard from his 12-year-old granddaughter today. Are you optimistic in your outlook for the future as you watch these protests, the diversity of the people on the streets, not just here again, but around the world? Are they having an impact?
I am very hopeful because these protests are different than the civil rights protests. The civil rights protests were largely Black, whereas these protests are very diversified. Sometimes you'll see a Black Lives Matter protest that is made up of mostly white people, which is until this point unheard of. So now that we are starting to see white people and to a lesser extent Hispanics and some Asians become involved and invested in the struggle, I believe that we will see real change because it's not just a Black issue anymore. With the advent of social media and everyone's cell phone cameras, we are seeing these horrible incidents come directly into your living room or rather right on your phone. So I think I am very hopeful that we will see some change come out of this, and I'm hopeful for the future. But again, there needs to be legislation at the national level that forces these police departments to change.
Well, will that
And I
translate?
believe we'll see that.
Will that change translate into the election, not just at the presidential level, but people who are up for reelection in Congress? Do you think that what you see on the ground here in Washington today, and the folks who are marching for justice, but then you have the President of the United States calling for law and order in his speech last night, do you think this will all translate at the voting box?
I hope so. I know that, again, one of the main messages that we are seeing pushed forward is for everyone to get out and vote, to go to the ballot box. We are seeing that message conveyed time and time again. And now, with the professional athletes becoming involved, which is really a godsend. It is the dreams of our ancestors to see popular professional athletes become involved in these social justice and civil rights movements. Now that they're getting involved, they're throwing some of their heft and resources behind it. Regarding the NBA owners, they are now making their arenas available for voting centers for people to come out and vote. And that's critical that we are able to get people involved in the civic process to voice their right as U.S. citizens to get out and vote, and more importantly, vote for people that are best going to represent your interests in Congress. And often, obviously, those are going to be people from the Democratic Party that are going to be which is a party that is more representative of blacks and minorities within our elective bodies. So it's critical, and I am really looking forward to the outcome of this year's election.